and a good Tuesday. It's Tuesday, right, Ed?
It better be.
Okay, it's Tuesday. Good Tuesday evening to you, wherever you might be, whether you're down the street, around the corner, across America, or somewhere around this great big world. We want to say thank you one more time for tuning in because we have a good one tonight. We've been anticipating this for how long, Ed? 2 or 3 weeks?
Oh, I would say yeah, definitely.
I'll say. We
At
want you
least.
to leave your comments. uh, Ask Lanny some questions if you have them. Uh, we'll be asking him some, but we're just delighted to have Lanny Frattare here tonight with us. Uh, he's just a real prince of a man. Uh, we consider him a friend. He is a friend. And Lanny, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule and being on the show with us.
Well, George, thank you. I just hope that. Am I coming in loudly and clearly?
Yep,
Very clear.
loudly and
Okay.
clear.
I just hope that we can get Ed Temple to come to Waynesburg as a student, not this one. The son. That's one of the reasons. A lot of reasons I came on the show, but certainly that's one of them. Thanks for asking me to be a part of your program. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I can tell you this: if it weren't for your influence, he wouldn't be. I would say he did. Waynesburg before that wasn't his first choice. You made it his first choice, so we appreciate that.
Hmm. So Lanny's looking for the younger model uh, instead of the older model.
George, it's to the show. Notice my name's not on the show, right?
Former Waynesburg student. I like
Just
that.
yeah, just yeah. Okay.
I like that. Ladies and gentlemen, this is former Waynesburg student, Mr. Ed Temple out of Columbus, Ohio. And if you've been with us any amount of time, you know him by now, and I'll let it right there. That covered it all, right, Ed?
Pretty much. I mean, you didn't say anything too negative. I don't feel too insulted. I think I'll probably be on the next show, George.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear that. Lanny, 33 years with the Pittsburgh Pirates, play by play. Wow, that's a lot of games. Do you have any idea how many games that is?
I do. Late in the 2008 season, I reached 5,000 games. So it's about 5,050, something like that. I'm a very blessed man. I wanted to be a baseball announcer since the time I was 12 years old. Growing up in Rochester, New York, I heard a lot of Mel Allen, the voice of the New York Yankees. And I told my dad when I was 12 or 13, I said, Dad, I want to do that. I want to be a baseball announcer. And my parents did everything in their power to open the doors for me. And then when I went to high school, my teachers knew what my dream was. When I went to college, my professors knew what my dream was. And then at the age of 28, I realized my dream, became a pirate broadcaster, and stayed for 33 years.
Wow. I was telling my wife about that, Lanny. I said he knew when he was 12 years old what he wanted to be. I said, I'm almost 74. I'll be 74 in September. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. She said, well, you're never going to grow up, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
33 years. Wow. Over 5,000 games. Before we move on, I wanted to mention you had kept every scorecard during your career, and then you turned them over to your son. Is that correct?
I did. I kept the scorecards for two reasons. Number one, I always put in a lot of work filling out my scorecard. I would start with a blank canvas, and by the time I finished with all the notes about the pitchers and the managers and the coaches and the teams and then the players, I just couldn't bring myself to throw them out. But I found out that what I did is I filed my scorecards by team. so that if I were traveling to Cincinnati and St. Louis, I would take the Cincinnati and St. Louis files with me, not only for this year, but maybe even for the last several years, just in case there was anything that came up on the broadcast that I needed to refer back to a previous game. So, and then after I left the Pirates and I had a conversation with my son, and he decided, or we decided, that it would be a good idea to see if there were any fans out there that would like to have one of these scorecards, certainly one of a kind. And what we found was that a lot of people were interested in the card because it was a monumental day. They very often, people would let us know that, that's the first time I went to a game with my son, or that's the first time that I went to a ball game with a woman that became my wife. So it fell into place very well for us.
Ed?
Yeah. So, Lanny, a lot of musicians, they, obviously one of the reasons why they're musicians because they have a talented voice. As soon as I overheard you talking to Edward for the first time on the phone, I said, man, he's got a radio voice. How much of a part of being a good a radio guy, or a television guy for that matter, is just being able to have that voice? And is that something you had always had, or is that something that you were taught?
No, I wasn't taught that, or I guess I taught myself how to cultivate a voice that was pleasant to listen to. What I tell my students at Waynesburg is that you don't have to have a great voice to be a sportscaster. You have to have a voice that is pleasant to listen to. So a good number of my students that I have mentored over the years have those type of voices. The bottom line is that if you can't, if you have a great voice, but you can't announce, or if you don't cuddle up to the important principles of sportscasting, then you're not going to last. And there are certainly a number of examples of guys that had great voices, but just never lasted because there was, it's a part of what you'd like to have as a sportscaster or as an announcer, but it's not the only thing. And it certainly, as I say, you don't have to have a great voice to be a sportscaster.
You said that 12 years old you knew what you wanted to do, and your teachers knew what you wanted to do. Did they have any type of extracurricular activity like a radio club or any such things like that when you went to school?
Two things happened that benefited me. One, when I let my teachers know that this is what I wanted to do, we did not have a PA system in our school. And so we would have assemblies that met maybe every other week. And there would be announcements at this assembly. And my teacher, Jim Molesworth, who was my homeroom teacher, encouraged me to do that. And you can imagine when he first encouraged me to do that, how petrified I was of the idea that here I was going to be, sophomore, junior in high school, standing in front of my classmates and the upperclassmen and delivering messages. The other thing that was a benefit for me was that I played 3 sports, was also the swim coach. And Coach Graham came to me and said, would you do the announcing for our swim meets? And our gym, our pool area did not have a scoreboard. And that's when I first experienced the power of an announcer. The swimmers did not get up on the block until I announced their names. The fans that came to the swim meets needed to hear me announce the winners definitively before they knew what was going on, the score of the meet. And then, of course, one of the things I really enjoyed was when we had diving, and you had to explain what the dive was, the degree of difficulty, and then you announce what the judges rated the dive. So as I say, it was my first experience with the power of being an announcer and people reacting to what you had to say, and it was infectious.
Ed?
Yeah. So what do you think your? I mean, you did games for decades. Is there a shining moment?
Well, I guess in different ways. First of all, one of my all-time favorite games. I became a very close friend of Jim Leland. Jim managed the Pirates from the mid '80s into the mid '90s, and he allowed me to he allowed me to be a part of his entourage. And I was really surprised when the first time he said to me, we were in New York, and he said, "Lanny, come on up to my suite after the game." And I went up there, and he was there with his coaches, and they started talking about trading players, and I said to Jim, "I shouldn't be here," and he said, "No, I trust you," and that was that was an important thing for me to hear. The manager of the Pirates trusting me and sharing with me. So because of the closeness that I had with Jim, and then of course with his wife Katie and their two children Patrick and Kelly, when Jimmy took over a ball club in the mid '80s that was a laughingstock of baseball, and then span of 4 years he turned it into a division-winning team. And so my all-time favorite game in relationship to Jim was the clincher of 1990. It was in St. Louis. Doug Drabeck against Joe McGrain. The game ended with a ground ball to second base. The game was over in about 2 minutes, or 2 hours and 15 minutes. And it's my all-time favorite game from that standpoint. Now, from an announcing standpoint, probably my favorite game was an extra inning game. The Pirates had two pitchers, Francisco Cordova and Ricardo Rincon. Cordova pitched 9 innings. Rincon pitched the 10th inning, and no-hit ball. 10 innings of no-hit baseball. But the reality of the rules of baseball is it is not a no-hitter until the game is over. So after 9 no-hit innings, that was not a no-hitter. And it was still not a no-hitter after the top of the 10th when Rincon retired the Astros without a hit. Then Mark Smith in the bottom of that 10th inning hit a 3-run homer, and I said rather concisely, "Home run, no-hitter, you've got it all." And that's my all-time favorite call because every announcer wants to be able, in the shortest number of words, capsulize a significant moment.
So the key is the announcer sets the tone, the atmosphere. He paints the picture, right?
That's the intent. Certainly on radio, and if you're doing an internet broadcast, and even some cases where you've got some streaming going on, video streaming. But in many cases, my experience has been that the video of a streaming broadcast is not all that good. So the play-by-play announcer still has to pay tribute to those important ingredients that are going to make sure that the audience knows exactly what's going on. And I'm sure you guys would agree with me that one of the major criticisms of radio sportscasters for years has been they never give the score enough. And that's one of the things I teach to my students at Waynesburg. But fortunately for me, Bob Prince, and by the way, when you referred to me earlier in this broadcast as a prince of a guy, I had to smile because my predecessor was Bob Prince. And one thing that Bob Prince taught me was that you need to create rules for when you give the score in baseball. And so I said to Bob when he told me this, I said, "Give me the rules." And he said, "Well, first of all, you do it every batter. Every new batter, you give the score in the inning." Okay. He said, "Every time you see 3 balls, 2 strikes on the scoreboard, give the score. Make it like Pavlov's dog. When you see 3 and 2, you don't salivate, you give the score. Every time there's a change of score. Every time you go to a commercial break. And if you don't think you've given the score recently, then give it." So there you go. And the great thing for me is that I never had anybody that could come up to me and say, "You don't give the score enough." I had one guy do it to me. And he said, "You don't give the score enough." And I said, "Sir, you tell me when you were listening. I'll go get the tape, and I'll bet you $100 that you'll change your mind about what you just said to me. And he looked at me and goes, well, maybe it was your partner then. Maybe it wasn't you. Okay. Matter of fact, I got a letter once from a fan that said you give the score too much. I said, thank you very much. I've reached nirvana. Thank you very much.
Wow.
So, Lanny, has there ever been a question you wish you would have had asked to you that you never got asked?
That's a good one.
No, I don't. I can't think of one offhand. Just as an offshoot of your question, one of the things I strongly believe is that as it relates to my students and as it related to the people that listen to me do Pirate baseball, I was never afraid to be really honest with my listeners, and I'm not afraid to be honest with my students about who I am. And, for example, all my students at Waynesburg know I've been divorced twice. They all know that I've been in alcohol rehab 3 times. And I don't have a problem with sharing that with them because, number one, I do believe that there's a possibility that if I'm going to talk to them about 33 years as a Pirate broadcaster and talk to them about the glory, then I should share with them some of the other aspects. I mean, obviously, you can imagine that particularly my first wife, she and I got divorced, and we raised 2 great children, but being on the road a lot and being away from home a lot did not help our marriage. Now, we did stay married for 28 years. And the other thing is that alcoholism is an easy thing to fall into when you're a baseball announcer and you're traveling as much as you do. But my point being, again, if you're going to talk about the glory with your students, if you're going to share the positive with your listeners and your viewers, then what's wrong with being open with them, particularly in baseball, where that you have people listening to you that spend their summer with you. Mm-hmm. That they're sharing their baseball memories with you. And so why shouldn't they know as much about you as they can, within certain limits?
When you when you went to college, you majored in communications, and when you started your radio, you was a disc jockey at first, right?
That's correct.
As time went on, you just said not only the glory things, but sometimes the gory things. What are some of the struggles early on when you first started and leading up to when you went into the Pittsburgh Pirates, broadcast booth? What's some of the struggles, be it physical or mental, that you went through?
Well, I became a disc jockey out of college, and I worked as a disc jockey while I was still in college. Well, my junior and senior years, I bussed from Ithaca, New York to Rochester, New York every weekend to do the all-night shows on Saturday morning and Sunday morning, and then I would bus back to Ithaca. So it was natural that when I graduated that the program director asked me to take on a full-time job, do the all-night show, and what was beneficial for me was that I was going to get married and I needed health benefits and a regular job. But after 4 years of that, and I was not a very good disc jockey, I had a lot of trouble trying to identify myself and trying to define myself as a disc jockey. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't very good. And then I finally, came to the realization that I always wanted to do baseball. That was my dream, and so I needed to get away from disc jockey work and get into play-by-play. The fortunate thing is that a gentleman named Carl Steinfeld, who had been the general manager in Rochester, became the general manager in Charleston. He asked me to go along with him and become the Charleston Charlies broadcaster, and it was the Pirate affiliate in 1974 and 75. And of course that was my big break because the Pirate people heard of me, and and I got the Pirates job in 1976. In terms of no, there were no physical problems, challenges, but when you work minor league baseball, you don't make a lot of money. I was paid $350 a month to do minor league baseball, and matter of fact, I was paid so little that I was able to get a dormitory room at Morris Harvey College in Charleston. That was my residence that first summer in '74. I couldn't afford to get an apartment. I went to the university and said, "Do you have a dorm room I could rent from you?" And they said yes, and that's where I spent my entire summer of 1974.
Lanny, do you have, if somebody were saying, what's the advantage of going to Waynesburg? Why go to Waynesburg as far as learning how to be a broadcaster?
Well, let me first of all point out, in fairness to anybody interested in majoring in communications, I can't compare Waynesburg to another school because I don't know all of what's going on at those other schools. What I can say to you is that Waynesburg, because it has a TV trailer, a mobile TV truck, we have the wherewithal to televise home football games and televise home basketball games. And plus, with the radio station, to announce all the football games, both home and road, and all the basketball games, home and road. And we also do radio play-by-play of the Waynesburg baseball team and the Waynesburg softball team. And now, with the conference digital network, we're doing lacrosse and we're doing soccer. And so, of the 28 students that I have on my team, and I'm very possessive of them, we've got them all doing a lot of play-by-play, and not just the major sports, doing all kinds of sports, wrestling, as I said, volleyball, lacrosse, soccer, and I am strongly of the opinion that once you learn the principles of preparing to do a sporting event and what you need to do to prepare to do a sporting event, that preparation and that dedication and devotion to preparation will serve you well no matter what the sport is.
What's it like, Lanny? Like you wanted to be a baseball announcer, but what's it like when all of a sudden they ask you to do a hockey game or another sport? And you've got to call that play-by-play to whatever sport that is.
Well, I believe with all my heart that if you ask me to do a sporting event, if you give me a week, you got to give me some time, okay? If you give me a week, and I'll be ready to go. I will call coaches that I know and ask them for terminology. I will ask them about rules. I will talk to the coaches that are going to be involved in that game. I will find out about their players. I will submerge myself in that sport. But let me point out one thing to you. Of all the sports that I've ever done, the toughest sport to do is baseball, without question. Everybody says to me, wait a minute, hockey's got to be the toughest. It is not. Hockey is easy. Once you identify the players, once you learn the players and who they are and their uniform numbers and their names, and once you decide locations on the ice, hockey is easy. Mm-hmm. But the problem with baseball is that there is no common rhythm to baseball. And so the good baseball announcers are those that can quickly ascertain the rhythm of the game and then understand that what they contribute to the game is based on what the game gives you. If you have a lot of 1, 2, 3 innings, there's not a lot of room for extemporaneous information. If you've got a guy that's going 3 and 2 on a lot of hitters, and if the half innings are extended, elongated, then you have to be filling with more information, etc. But if you try to fill in a game that doesn't give you that room, then it sounds totally awkward. And plus, to be a good baseball announcer, you need to know the game inside and out, and that is not so true necessarily. You can get by doing hockey and basketball, and because you won't have the opportunity to talk rules and strategy during hockey and basketball and football as you will for baseball. For example, you can't be a good baseball announcer if you don't know that with a runner at third and less than 2 outs or fewer than 2 outs, your audience needs to know where's the infield. Okay? And if you don't know that, if you don't know that that is the relevant issue here, then you can't. Then you're not on your way to being a good baseball announcer.
What? You got a question, Ed?
No, go ahead, George.
The preparation, on an average, when you were calling Major League Baseball, what was the average time pregame preparation for you?
Well, I learned that when you're on the road and you're looking for something to do, it was certainly, and again, remember, most of my career was pre-laptops and pre-internet.
Right.
So for my preparation, I was taking media guides with me and reading media guides and reading rule books, and I didn't have the opportunity to go on the internet and read a story about a team. But what I found out is that because the demands on my time at home, family related and even front office related, I tried to do as much as I could on the road, even to the point that if we were playing in St. Louis and then we were going to go home to play the Cincinnati Reds, I would start making out my score sheet for the Cincinnati series while I was still in St. Louis. And then I was also doing my preparation for the Cincinnati series while I was still in St. Louis. So I'll tell you this: I'm doing a high school baseball game tomorrow night in Pittsburgh, and I have already done 7 hours of preparation for this high school game. And by the time I finish tomorrow, it'll probably be close to 9 hours, because I don't believe that I can do a good job. And I don't care whether it's high school sports or college sports or pro sports. You are cheating yourself and cheating your listeners if you don't prepare properly. And unfortunately, there are a lot of guys in our business that don't do the preparation that they need to do.
Right.
So, Lanny, what is the biggest compliment you've got received as a broadcaster, and then what's your most embarrassing moment?
Well, the thing that touches my core the most, and what really warms my heart, is that I've had so many people come up to me and tell me how much they enjoyed sharing their baseball memories with me, and that is so important to me, to know that I was there 33 years and I mattered to a lot of people. My presence in the broadcast booth was of some significance. As to my most embarrassing moment, I once made the mistake. I was doing an afternoon game at Three River Stadium, and the producer came over to me, and I took my headset back like this, and the producer said, "We're going to cut away for a news break." Now, the thing you have to understand is that when the network or when the flagship station cuts away for a news break, the announcers need to continue to announce the game, because there's all these network stations that are probably not cutting away for the news break. And if they are, they're doing it at their own timing. So I did not hear what the news break was all about. So at some point, I reached down the booth and I yelled to the producer, not yelled, but I whispered, "What is the news break?" And he told me James Earl Ray died. Now, the problem for me is that I didn't hear James Earl Ray. I heard James Earl Jones. And now it would have been fine if I had just said something simple like, "Isn't that too bad James Earl Jones has died?" But when I came back from the news break, being the kind of guy that I am, I decided to go into this long dissertation about what a sad day it is for baseball, because so many of us think that the best baseball movie ever is Field of Dreams, and how many of us can recite that great line from James Earl Jones' character, baseball reminds us of once that was great and can be, So I went full tilt into this thing, and my partner Bob Walk was like this with his, and I looked over at him and I what's going on? And he lip synced to me, James Earl Ray, not James Earl Jones. And so I started sweating profusely, and I said on the air, I said, "Oh my gosh, folks, I feel like such a jerk. I feel like such a jerk." Well, later that week, there was a website that declared a jerk of the week, and I was it. And also, it seemed like every time I went into a major league city, there'd be a little note there say, the Pittsburgh Pirates are here in St. Louis this weekend for a 3-game series, and they come to town with their broadcaster, Lanny Frattare, who wrongly identified the death of, so I mean, it was, one time I went into a stadium, it was in San Diego, and what was the question on the scoreboard? What character did James Earl Jones play in Field of Dreams? I mean, they just kept pounding me with it, but I laugh about it now, but I must tell you that it was a very painful couple of days.
Well, George, what about, let me ask you another one, Lanny. What's the most difficult thing about being a professor at Waynesburg?
Not probably. The most difficult thing is that because I knew what I wanted to do, and because I know how great this profession is, I get frustrated. I'm not a patient person. I get frustrated when I come across young people, and fortunately not too many, that don't buy into what I'm telling them. Not that I'm trying to make them like me, but trying to convince them that this is a career that they will truly love, but to elevate it to a level where they can enjoy it, that they need to make a commitment and they need to prioritize in such a way that, okay, yeah, the classwork and the studies are number one, but number two better be your career. And I give some students some leeway. Okay, their freshman year, maybe they don't get it. But if they don't get it by their sophomore year, I'm a little bit frustrated because I know that before they wake up, it's going to be junior year, senior year, and then they're going to graduate, and then what do? And if they haven't done the hard work, then there's nothing there for them after graduation. Like I said, fortunately, let me put it this way. Probably 40% of the students that I've come across had no problem buying into what I was telling them they had to do. And then there was probably 30% previously and currently that are still sorting it out. And then there's 30% that don't get it and probably will never get it. And I won't go to them. I don't think it's fair for me to go to them and say, go find another career. But if they came to me and said, what do you think? I would be honest with them. I'm not going to lie to them. But it's similar to a young person that wants to be a star athlete. If you're not going to put in the time practicing and making a commitment to your sport, then you're going to sit on the bench for 4 years in high school or 4 years in college.
Right.
Only one guy starts as the quarterback, okay? there's most baseball teams. It's the same 9 or 10 guys that start all the time, and the other 5 or 6 guys on a high school baseball team almost never get in the game. Is that what you want to do? Is that what you want to, or are you going to work hard so you're in the starting lineup? And same thing in broadcasting, so that when there's a job open, you're the guy that gets it. And it doesn't, if you come in second or third or fourth or fifth, it doesn't matter. If you don't get the job, it doesn't matter whether you come in second, third, fourth, or fifth. It only matters as to whether you get that competitive job in broadcasting that moves you into a position that is starting to be the stepping stone to the big time.
You was broadcasting minor league baseball when you went up to the Pirates. Is that correct?
I was with Charleston announcing minor league baseball, yes.
What was it like when you stepped in to that booth for the very first time?
Scary, but you need to understand also that my first game, by the way, was in 1976, and it was in Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia. And not only was I finally doing Major League Baseball, not spring training, and not this was my first big game. And because that opening day in 76 was televised, my partner Milo Hamilton was on television all by himself, and I was on radio all by myself. But I said a little prayer, thanking God for giving me this opportunity to realize my dream, and also prayed that God would let me keep the job for a while. But let me also tell you this. One of the reasons that it was scary is that I couldn't get out of my head that 99% of the people listening to my broadcast, 99% of the people listening to my broadcast knew more about the Pirates than I did. I never saw Roberto Clemente play. I had very little knowledge of the 71 World Series. I never was at Forbes Field. I never knew about the great Bill Mazeroski and what a great defensive second baseman he was. Mm-hmm. I got the job in 76 in February, and a month later I was in spring training. I had no chance to prepare about Pirate history and learn about the Pirates in terms of its history. And so what I had to be careful about is that I did not come off like some know-it-all about the Pirates, because again, I knew that most of my audience, if not all of it, knew more about the Pirates than I did. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that's part of the problem that some announcers have when they move into a new town, is they act like they know more than they do.
Excuse me. I lived in Tarentum for a short period of time back in 80 or 76, 75, 76, 77, somewhere around there. A man that I knew, Ralph Lampus, who owned the Springfield Block Company, he supplied all the cinder block that was found in Three River Stadium. So he had season tickets to the Pirate game, and every now and then he'd call me up and say, "Why don't you take your boy and go to the Pirate game?" I'd been to Forbes Field when I was younger, but now I was at Three River Stadium, and there's just something about being in a ballpark. And I gotta ask you this, Lanny. It's a crazy, weird question. But anytime, and most people I know, that when you get to the ballpark, the first thing that hits you is hunger. And you gotta have a hot dog. Did you have a problem with that, or were you able to overcome that if you did have the problem?
No, that was never a problem. No, the food was never an issue, and one of the things that's a reality, or was a reality when I started in 1976, was every major league team had a press room, and they would serve you a meal, and so you early on learned that you did your work down in the field and in the clubhouses, and did your preparation work, and then you went in and had steak one night and pork chops and meatloaf and just a great, and this was true of every city, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, wherever. I did have to learn that the people that were providing you with the free food deserved to be tipped.
Mm.
And then back in those days, after games, you could go into the press room and there was free booze. Matter of fact, I saw Bob Prince one time. There was a guy at Three Rivers. His name was Diz Bellows. He was the bartender in the press room. And I was making $20,000 a year my first year, and I didn't think, and I knew that wasn't a lot of money. I know it is, this is mid '70s, but I saw Bob Prince. He went up to Diz Bellows and he pulled out a 20, a 10, and a 5, and he said, "Diz, take one." And Diz took the 20. And then I pulled out a quarter, a dime, and a nickel and said, "Diz, take one," because that was where I was financially at that point. But no, matter of fact, I very often went to the ballpark very early because I found it to be very peaceful, no matter where it was, no matter what city it was. Most places you could go. For a 7:30 game, 7 o'clock game, I'd very often be in the broadcast booth 2:30, and just enjoying the beautiful day and doing my homework. There are some places that are just that I love to do that. Denver, Coors Field, love to go into Denver's ballpark about 2:30 in the afternoon. Dodger Stadium almost always did. I think Dodger Stadium is the best ballpark in America, and yet it's the oldest ballpark, second oldest ballpark in the National League, but it's the best ballpark without a question. So, that's was not food for me. It was.
Can you hear me? Irrespective of sport, if somebody wanted to go into the profession, which announcer should they be listening to?
Well, I wouldn't listen to just one. 2 points off your question. Number one, the current generation, the young people that are interested in broadcasting, and I tell them this, they need to listen to radio play-by-play more. That is where the entry-level jobs are. And so if they're just listening to Jim Nantz and Al Michaels and Joe Buck and doing football, then they don't have any sense whatsoever about what the radio broadcast is supposed to be. If they listen to a guy like Tony Caridi, who's the voice of the West Virginia Mountaineers and is one of the great football play-by-play announcers, same thing with basketball. You want to do basketball on the radio or the internet, you got to listen to radio. You want to be a baseball announcer, you got to listen to pirate radio. You can't watch television. But the other thing too you have to remember is that you can listen for techniques and you can listen for how it is supposed to sound, but you cannot copy somebody else's style or somebody else's terminology, because the number one rule of broadcasting is to be yourself.
Well, I can tell you this: we used to listen to baseball games on the radio, and I had more fun listening to the games than watching it on TV. I can tell you that. And as a matter of fact, even when it was on TV, we turned the TV volume down and listened to the radio.
Well, I think baseball is best on the radio for a couple of reasons, including the fact that there are a lot of TV producers and directors that try too many gimmicks, believing that the game can't carry itself. And I am disappointed that more people don't encourage their grandchildren and their children to come on the back porch with them and listen to the game on the radio. I'm disappointed also that more parents and grandparents don't encourage their young people to keep score at a baseball game. I don't know how you can enjoy baseball and not keep score. I don't know how you can do that. Maybe it's a generational thing. But you need to see that batting order. You need to keep track of ground ball and ground ball to short, you put down 6-3. Fly ball to left, you put 7 down. You need to do that. And then plus you have a memento for the game.
What if I ask the question in reverse? Who's somebody you can listen to of what not to do?
Well, that's instead of naming names. Let me just tell you that if you don't prepare, if you ever come across a broadcaster that you can tell is not prepared, then you should be telling yourself, I'm not going to emulate this guy. If you don't understand that, let me give you some other pet peeves of mine. Okay, first of all, there is a series of words that I give my students that I tell them I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear. I have 4 words that I don't want my students to use on the broadcast. And one of them is the word actually, which everybody has a tendency to say, just drop it into their conversation like actually, when the word is not necessary 95% of the time that it's used. The second word is nice. Nice to me is one of the most worthless words in the world. Because it doesn't say anything. And I tell my students, if you're going to tell me that Jimmy Jones is a nice person, that doesn't tell me. If you tell me he's thoughtful and considerate and caring, that tells me something. Okay? The other word is special. Another worthless word. If you tell me that boy, that's a special play, or that we've got a special event for you, it doesn't tell me anything whatsoever. It's a worthless word. Okay? And then my favorite, the fourth one that I cannot stand, and I'm trying to get everybody in the world of sportscasting to eliminate it from their vernacular, is the word unbelievable. Because nothing that a sportscaster says is unbelievable. And I submit to you that in many cases, when a sportscaster says that player did something unbelievable, that sportscaster is insulting the player, saying that I can't believe he made that play. Well, take Sidney Crosby, for example. I used to hear hockey announcers say, what Sidney did was unbelievable. No, he's Sidney Crosby. He does those things. Okay? And I told my class, by the way, I probably shouldn't have done this because they're college students. But I told them if they listened to the CBS broadcast with Jim Nantz and Tony Romo doing the championship game, and if they took a shot of whiskey every time Tony Romo said unbelievable, they would be drunk by the end of the first quarter. It is a totally, it doesn't belong. There is not, matter of fact, I had a student once say to me, Lanny, when can I use the word unbelievable? I said, I'll tell you what. If I jump up in the air and don't come down, that's unbelievable. Okay? If I jump out of this window and don't break my leg, that's unbelievable. But to say somebody makes a diving catch, that's unbelievable? The game starts with 3 home runs, that's unbelievable? These things are done on a regular basis in sports. That's why they are who they are, because they can do remarkable, incredible, unlikely things. There are so many other words, and here's the thing is, if you don't have a vocabulary, right? If you answer your question too, Ed, you want to know when you can tell that an announcer doesn't have a vocabulary? when he says things like unbelievable or wow. You know, when an announcer says wow, wait a minute. You that's the best, a great play, that's the best you can give me is wow?
Well, I guess I'm not going to make it in radio. I've said that word way too many times.
What word, wow or unbelievable?
Probably both.
Well, and here's the thing is that there is nothing wrong with saying to announcers that they should have a high standard as it relates to grammar and as it relates to vocabulary. All right? If you, I don't, and believe me, even if there are words in your vocabulary that the average person doesn't know the definition of, if you use them properly, they'll figure it out okay. But to say, well, I'm not going to use big words or I'm not going to use a word that's different because my audience won't know what it means, I don't believe that one bit.
Well, Tony, going back to Tony Romo real quick. So let's say Tony Romo, I enjoy listening to him because he's an expert. I understand he's probably not doesn't qualify as a great radio guy just because he's probably not as well trained as somebody coming out of broadcasting. So he would be an example, I would think, of somebody not to be like.
No, that's not true. I think Tony Romo most times does a credible job.
Okay.
What is going to be interesting to see if Tony is able, as the years go on, and he now is getting away from his playing days when he had a better understanding. You know, when Tony first moved into the broadcast booth, there was a lot of information that he had that was related to NFL that was fresh news. It was fresh information. But now as the years go on, no, I don't. I mean, I think the best color analyst in TV football is Chris Collinsworth myself. But I know from talking to people and talking to my students that people have all kinds of different favorites, and but there are things that announcers do that violate common sense. And what bothers me is that you would hope that management would at some point sit down with them and ask them about some of the things they do. But I suspect that maybe they're just afraid that, if they try to sit somebody down who's got a pretty big name or ego, that it won't be a good exchange.
Right. Makes sense.
What do you have a favorite baseball announcer?
I know. Vince Scully's the greatest baseball announcer God ever created. And what defines that for me is that Vince Scully has always proven that he can take any baseball game and much like a true artist, take that canvas and make it into something quite remarkable. With a lot of preparation. Vin's got a tremendous vocabulary. Not afraid to use quotes where appropriate, and a great storyteller. As a matter of fact, Vince Scully, most of his time with the Dodgers, worked alone. And I wish, one of the things, and I talked to Greg Brown about this, I wish that the Pirates would more often have Greg and Joe Block work radio by themselves. Because in the golden age of radio baseball broadcasting, the announcers worked alone. Yes, they were partners. In other words, Bob Prince had Jim Woods. But Bob did 2 innings, then he left the booth, and then Jim Woods did 2 innings. Okay? When Jack Buck and Mike Shannon were together, Jack would do a couple of innings, and then he would leave the booth, and Mike Shannon would do a couple of innings. And this constant back and forth with the color analyst, in most cases, the color analyst is totally worthless for a radio broadcast. Mm-hmm. And only the real good former athlete that understands that what he normally would do over on television is of no value on the radio broadcast. The fan needs to the game needs to breathe. The fan needs to hear the crowd murmuring. There needs to be those stories on radio, not long stories, short stories. And if the color analyst is always, well, that was a 1-2 breaking ball away, and he tried to hit it the other way, and on radio you don't need that. Okay? And the problem too is that what very often happens in Major League Radio broadcast booths is that there is a TV monitor. So what the color analyst is telling you on the radio broadcast is what he has just seen off the TV monitor, and guess what? You don't see the TV monitor. You're driving in your car, you're on your back porch, and it does not need to be super analyzed to that extent. And if you doubt me, then think back to the 50s and early 60s when the golden age of radio baseball announcing, okay?
Yep.
You heard one voice. Ernie Harwell gave it to Paul Carey, okay? They split back and forth. It was one voice, and it does not have to have that constant chatter from a color analyst that is offering the audience something that it doesn't need.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, Romans, and countrymen, our time is almost gone. Man, time went by fast. Lanny, thank you so very, very much.
Well, thank you very much for asking me to be on the show, Mike. Ed?
Appreciate you coming on.
We would love to have you come back sometime.
Next time we can talk presidential history.
Hey, I'd love that. I would love that. Yes, indeed.
My presidential stuff.
All righty. Yeah, we'll make it a point to get up with one another, and we'll do that.
Okay, George. All right, thank you.
So interesting. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, Romans, and countrymen, thank you for lending us both of your ears. Push this out there. Share it with your family and your friends and your neighbors. And whether you're down the street, around the corner, across America, or somewhere around this great big world, thank you. God bless you. Good night, everybody.